was, yes, I'm happy to. My opinion was that, and is, that she suffered from a major depressive episode, and that was a part of major depressive disorder.
Well, looking at your reports, sir, on your conclusions, would you agree with... So do you have your report?
He's reading from the wrong report.
Do you have your report, sir?
Counsel, can I see it sidebar just for a second?
It's not the wrong report. Sir, you would agree that your opinion on page 35 is that at the time of the incident, that Lindsay Clancy was suffering from a mental disease, and then you have the opinion, however, she retained substantial capacity to appreciate the wrongfulness or criminality of her conduct. Is that correct? Did I read that right? And the mental disease from which she suffered, in your opinion, was a mood disorder, major depressive episode. Is that right?
Yes.
And you further opined that she may have also had an anxiety disorder that preceded or continued to be present while the major depressive episode proceeded through January 24th. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Now, you're aware that she has been at Duxbury under a particular diagnosis of a mental disease or defect, right?
Yes.
What is that?
I believe it's adjustment disorder.
Adjustment disorder. Is it not your understanding, sir, that she's suffering, according to diagnosis, bipolar disorder?
I think well, you'd have to show me where you're referring to.
So, did you have a chance to review Dr. Helbrin's report?
I did.
And do you know what Dr. Helbrin's opinion was of a diagnosis? Diagnosis.
Yes.
What was it?
I think he made a diagnosis of bipolar type 2.
So you have nurse practitioner Gelada, who, as a treating practitioner, indicates that the diagnosis possibly is bipolar disorder, correct?
I don't know that she used those terms, but I know that she was concerned about the possibility.
And you know, because you've obviously read and incorporated into your report Dr. Resnick's opinion, correct?
Correct.
And what is Dr. Resnick's opinion, sir, to your understanding?
In terms of the diagnosis?
Yeah.
Bipolar type 2.
Okay. How about Dr. Zeisel? You also had access to and incorporated into his report, your report, his diagnosis. What was that?
No, offhand, I don't remember what his diagnosis was.
How about Meg Spinelli? Did you have a chance to review her report and incorporate that into your report?
I reviewed her report.
Do you know what her diagnosis was, sir?
I believe it was bipolar type 1.
Right. So with all of the various healthcare providers that have an opinion of bipolar type 1, would you agree that that is a very strong indicator that a person could very well be suffering from postpartum depression?
I'm confused by your question because that last piece is not necessarily inconsistent with the diagnosis of major depression.
Why is it that you two were interviewing Ms. Clancy together on those days?
Well, that's something that I do sometimes, conduct a joint interview. That's done in training contexts, for example, a fair amount. And in this case, many of the questions that we were going to ask her, a large number of the questions that we were going to ask her about her background and her history were going to be similar. So we were able to conduct those, ask those questions in a way and save some time, keep her from having to go through and ask and answer them twice. Then the third day, again, many of the questions that we were going to ask had to do with her thinking, feeling, and behavior, leading up to the time of January 24th. And basically, it involves kind of a step-by-step process, going very slowly, getting a lot of detail. And we expected that many of those questions, sort of step-by-step detail, were going to be things that we would be able to work on, or they were going to be things that we could ask twice, or we could ask once and see it on the video.
And in terms of your interviewing Ms. Clancy together, after that was done, did the two of you come up with a joint opinion on a diagnosis?
We did not, no. Although we were interviewing her together on 2 days, we took that information and we each independently came up with our own report, our own review of that information, our own analysis of what it meant, and so on. So, no, we wrote separate reports. We actually did not agree on the diagnosis.
Now, if we could have the PowerPoint. In terms of your evaluation of Ms. Clancy, including the records and the collateral interviews and your interviews of her, did you form some main conclusions?
I did, yes.
And if you could tell us, what were your major findings regarding Ms. Clancy's mental health history before September of 2022?
She had a fairly limited mental health history before September 2022. She did experience some anxiety related to achievement. She's a very strong student in school, and she got straight A's, basically. She experienced some anxiety while in nursing school doing case presentations because you have to stand up in front of a group, and that made her kind of anxious. And then she had some anxiety connected with her 3 pregnancies, some in the beginning about the ultrasounds and so on, and some sort of as she was returning to work. So after each child, she'd have some time off with a child, and then after several months she would return to work. And on each of those occasions, with Cora and Dawson and Callan, she had some anxiety because she didn't like to leave her children. That was an important consideration for her, whether it was dropping them off at school or returning to work or leaving them with a babysitter or going out with friends, going out on date night. She didn't like to leave them. And so those were some of the things that were connected with her mental health history before September of 2022. And this was in the context of her growing up as a highly achieving individual, getting very strong grades, competing in sports and competitive cheerleading. These are all things that the anxiety probably pushed her a little bit more in the direction of doing this very well, because she was a very hardworking and highly self-disciplined individual. She also grew up in a family that was close and comfortable, and had a number of friends that she spent time with, both as a girl and a teenager and so on. But she was very highly achieving, and I think one of the important aspects of her mental health history before September of 2022 is that she really did not experience anxiety in a way that interfered very much with her functioning. She had a little bit of she had about 6 months worth of treatment for the anxiety connected with the nursing school. But it was not something that interfered with her life very much prior to September of 2022.
And doctor, did you also learn that growing up as a child, she didn't experience any type of abuse, witness any domestic violence, have any sort of trauma or anything like that as she was growing up?
Yes, one of the psychological tests, which I'll talk about a little bit later, is called the Adverse Childhood Experiences measure, and that's something that asks an individual whether they went through what we would call adverse experiences or traumatic experiences as a child and an adolescent. And there are 10 of them, and if you have 4 or more of them, that puts you at higher risk for different kinds of adverse outcomes as an adult. She did not endorse any of those. So on the ACEs questionnaire, she had a 0, which really goes to the question that you ask of whether she had adverse or traumatic experiences as a child.
And so she did not, correct? She did not report any.
She did not report any, and there were any number of individuals who were asked similar questions about her childhood and her adolescence, and they all said.
Then should we move on to number 6, the mixed evidence about diagnosis and the nature of her problems?
Yes.
And what were your major findings in that area?
Over the course of the time that she was going through these experiences between mid-October and late January, she'd had a lot of providers offer a lot of diagnoses, and there were a lot of complicating considerations. So among some of the diagnoses that she'd been given were adjustment disorder with anxiety and depression, generalized anxiety disorder, major depressive disorder, bipolar disorder 2, postpartum depression, postpartum psychosis, post-traumatic stress disorder. That last one was not before January of 2023, but it's something that she has right now. And in addition to those diagnoses, which sort of implies that she has a disorder and she has symptoms, there were complicating factors. She had psychotropic medication with apparent adverse reaction. She had serious sleep deprivation over a 3-month period. She had between 5 and 8 months after the birth of her 3rd child. She had anxiety about returning to work in the fall of 22. She was worried about leaving her baby for work. And he was not taking the bottle. And the other thing, which was important for her, is she was always someone who was, she was into exercise. And she stopped exercising sometime in October when she started having these adverse reactions. But it's one of these things that it was a real difficult thing for her to handle when she couldn't do the running or the yoga or the Peloton or other things that she used to keep her anxiety managed.
Were you aware that she was able to return to exercising on several dates in December and in January, going to the Kingsbury Club where she was a member?
Yes, she was trying that, yes.
Yeah. And is that something that, as putting on your clinician hat for a moment, is that something that you would recommend to a patient that they, in this situation, that they try to do things like exercise to complement medication and therapy?
Well, if it works, it does work for some people, and they use it effectively over the course of their lives, particularly if they have some anxiety that might not fully need treatment, but it's something that might interfere with your life a little bit.
And what were your next observations?
Well, if we could move on to the next slide, please.
So here we have number 7, your diagnosis, bipolar 2 disorder. So was that your diagnosis of Ms. Clancy?
It was, and it was hard because of all the diagnoses in the records and all the symptoms that she experienced and so on. To make a diagnosis of bipolar disorder or bipolar 2 disorder, which is a kind of a less serious way of experiencing bipolar disorder, you have to have identifiable mood swings, and one is a period of depression, which she certainly had, but a period of depression, and that was something that made a big difference over a certain period of time in depressed symptoms and sadness and not having much or not having much motivation and things like that. But you also, for a bipolar diagnosis, need something where you have an identifiable period where the mood is much greater. It's much. One of the things that I might say is that one feels during a manic period sort of high, jumpy, decreased need for sleep, racing thoughts, sort of flight of ideas, thinking really fast, excessive appetites for different kinds of things, not getting tired, feeling important and powerful, and things like that. And I was having a hard time finding something that looked like it was a manic episode. There were times when she felt, as she described it after the birth of different children, she felt good, she felt on top of the world, she felt really close to them, her husband and her kids, and so on. But it's also something that it didn't look like a manic episode so much as it looked like she was really feeling good and getting back into exercise and things like that. So it's one of those considerations where the thing that sort of gave me pause for a while in diagnosing a bipolar disorder is that I didn't see that manic episode. But what really convinced me is that she's been at Duxbury now for more than 3.5 years. And the diagnosis of record at Duxbury is bipolar disorder. And they are, as I read the records, very careful about what they prescribe and how much and various other kinds of considerations. And one of the things that the records reflect is that when she was on some medication that's prescribed to help stabilize her mood, and it was discontinued for medical reasons, she had a kind of immediate response to that, which is to say, she noticed it, and that's a consideration as well. So I ended up with making a diagnosis of bipolar 2 disorder, which is a slightly less, not slightly, it's a less severe form of bipolar disorder.
And doctor, why did you diagnose with bipolar 2 and not bipolar?
Because bipolar, as I said, is a more severe kind of diagnosis. It's more noticeable. And if you had a bipolar diagnosis, then I would want to see something that clearly and definitely looks like a manic episode. And I did not see any evidence of that before January 24th of 2023.
And there were some incidents that have been described by witnesses who have testified and in the medical records, things like the defendant cleaning out her garage with her husband at one point in time. Was that something that you did or did not see as manic, and why?
Well, there was some indication in the records that some people thought it was manic. I did not see it that way. She did not describe, when I asked her, whether she did not describe that as a manic episode. She didn't think it was. And when I talked to Patrick Clancy, he said he didn't think it was either. And basically it was cleaning out the garage and getting a lot of stuff into 20 trash bags and so on. But one of the things he said is, they were both working hard, but it wasn't all her out there putting stuff in 20 trash bags, and he wasn't a part of it. He said he was definitely a part of it.
Okay. And would it be accurate that bipolar disorder requires that period of mania for, I believe it's 7 days, where bipolar 2 requires hypomania for 4 days? Is that right?
Yes, that's right.
Okay. And so did you see signs of hypomania?
Well, that's something where it's less clear that it's manic, and that's one of the things that inclined me toward bipolar 2 is I just did not see signs that were clearly manic episodes, but it looked like something that it possibly could have been a less serious or less severe manic episode.
And in terms of this diagnosis, this bipolar 2, is there a way to determine whether she always had this disorder or if it's something new, and if it's something new, when it appeared?
It's a disorder that typically comes on in adulthood. It's not something that you have as a kid or even for the most part as an adolescent. It's something that you start to show the signs of when you are in your 20s. For her, you don't have to get complicated at all. It's just, I had a psychotic episode. I heard a voice. The voice told me to do something terrible. I did it.
And after considering the evidence for acute psychosis, command hallucinations, did you then consider evidence against acute psychosis with command hallucinations?
I did, yes.
And what did you see?
One of the reasons, well, the first bullet point here is that the way she described this as happening is that she heard a voice that she'd never heard before, experienced an hallucination, and she's never experienced it since, but she only experienced it for the 18 minutes or so that it took to kill the children. And to put it mildly, that would be a very, very unusual pattern or manifestation of how this kind of thing comes about. Very unusual. I've been doing this kind of evaluation for many, many years, and I'm always very careful when someone tells me that they experienced a symptom only during the course of committing an offense.
Why is that, doctor? Why are you careful when someone tells you that they only experience this voice during a criminal offense?
Well, because it provides a convenient way of lessening your own culpability. I mean, it's always possible, but as I said, I find it very, very rare, whereas an explanation for why somebody did something, somebody might look at that and say it's a convenient way of somebody looks at me and I don't have the same culpability that I would otherwise.
And what was the next part of evidence that you saw against acute psychosis?
There was some discussion of whether this was postpartum, and so she was about 8 months away from having given birth to Callan, her youngest child. And most of the explanations, or most of the sources of authority like DSM-5 or the Cleveland Clinic will point to maybe 1 month after birth or 2 months after birth or something like that. But the farther away you get time-wise from the birth, the less likely it is, under those kinds of authority, to be postpartum. Now, it could be something else. And there were certainly some things that I saw that were symptoms of depression and other sorts of things that she experienced in January. But it was, given the time, it was less likely, I thought, to be postpartum. Then the next bullet was inconsistencies in her account. To me, when asked about this, she said, the voice said, "This is your last chance. You have to kill the kids so you can kill yourself." And it just kept repeating that, and only that, for about 18 minutes, or the duration of the time it took to do this. There were other times, though, for instance, when she was in the hospital after this happened and was talking to a psychiatric attending, when she said that the voice had said other things, for example, the children will suffer without you, or you have to take the kids with you, or things like that. So inconsistency is important because it suggests inaccuracy. In other words, which version is accurate? Is it the first? Is it the second? Is it neither? I mean, here it couldn't be both, because she said, "I only heard this." To some people she said that, and then "I heard this plus this." To other people she said that.
And doctor, if she had said to a third person that it was a different version, such as "you have to kill the kids so you can kill yourself because there's a danger to you and the kids," would that be a further consideration of the inconsistencies?
Objection.
Yeah, overall, yes.
The more inconsistency there is,
Can we have a basis for that, at least?
The test,
It's asked as a hypothetical?
hypothetical, yes.
I'll allow that.
So it's not based on evidence, it's a hypothetical.
It's a hypothetical.
you might have to repeat the question.
So if the person has a third version of what happened, what the voice said, and what the reasons the voice gave, would that be important in your assessment as well regarding inconsistency?
Objection. It's speculation, it's not based on evidence, and there's no foundation for a hypothetical question.
Why don't you just ask it as the hypothetical? You know, assuming this, and then go that way.
Doctor, a hypothetical question for you. Assuming that a person has already given two versions of a voice, what the voice said for them to do, and then gives a third version of what the voice told them to do, would that be significant to you in assessing the inconsistencies?
Objection for the record.
Yeah, overall, go ahead.
What I would say is the more inconsistency there is, the more problematic I find it to take any one.
Combined with altruistic filicide.
Yeah. Altruistic filicide is a term that's used that means killing your kids out of love. Not because you're trying to be cruel or for material gain or because you want them out of your lives or any of that, but killing them out of love so that you could basically, they wouldn't have to suffer, so you could prevent their suffering. And what she did, I thought, was begin with what I said a minute ago was a highly lethal and very serious suicide attempt.
And that was preceded
It
by
was
what?
preceded by months of thoughts and impulses about you should harm yourself, you should kill yourself, your brain is damaged, that sort of thing. And that, I think, is the beginning of the way to understand what happened that day. The second point is that, as I've said before, she didn't like to leave her children. Whether that was for date night or school or going back to work or anything, she did not like to leave her children. And if she had taken her own life, then her children would have been without her, and she thought that they would suffer. And she'd been having these thoughts both about herself and about her children over a several-month period. And the other thing that I will say is that she was in pain. she was suffering. She was doing a little bit better than she had been before she went into McLean, but she was still in pain. She was suffering. I think she was even desperate. And that is something that is often characterized as people who try to take their own life. They're in pain, they're suffering, and they're trying to put a stop to it. And I think when she decided at some point that she was going to put a stop to it, then she had to answer the question of what to do about the kids. And she didn't want to leave them, and she was convinced that they would suffer without her.
For the next slide. And further evidence that you saw for the suicide combined with altruistic filicide?
There was. One of the things that she said when asked about what happened is that in the course of strangling each child, she said, "Go to God, baby, go to God." And that was part of her expectation, that she and the children would be together in heaven with God. She was raised as a Catholic, and this, as I understand Catholic considerations, that's not necessarily what happens, but when I asked her about that, when I said, "Isn't suicide a mortal sin?"
Yeah, can I see counsel over here? All right. After the following sidebar conference, I think the defendant made a motion. I'm going to allow argument in regards to the motion. I'll hear first from the defendant, and then I will hear from the Commonwealth. Mr. Reddington.
Thank you, Judge. Your Honor, this has been obviously a long trial and a lot of work on the part of everybody involved, from the court to the staff to the prosecutors to myself, and needless to say, the strain on Lindsay Clancy. I have to move for a mistrial reluctantly. The reason is that this is intentional misconduct on the part of the prosecution. You know that this whole idea of injecting Roman Catholic faith, the concept of mortal sin, into this trial occurred, I don't even remember now, about a week ago, and I objected, but before I could get the objection out, Your Honor had us at the sidebar at the same time, and very forcefully, in my opinion, indicated to the jurors that they should not consider that to any degree. At the time, I put on record the fact that I did not feel that, I felt that the court's instructions were sufficient. They were forceful, they were right on point, and we moved forward without a motion for a mistrial. I made a tactical decision. But unfortunately, at this point, it's a concern I have, because this is just over the top. It's the same thing again, talking about religion, talking about heaven, talking about killing people and the impact or the effect that it would have on Lindsay as well as her children. The fact that this is not the first time that it occurred during the trial, and the prosecution has previously brought up the concept of mortal sin, based on your ruling in the past, in conjunction with the fact that they brought it up again, I believe it was intentional misconduct, and I feel that the court should grant a motion for mistrial.
All right, thank you. Commonwealth?
Thank you, Your Honor. The question I asked the witness did not ask for any testimony about religion, about Catholicism, about mortal sins, or anything like that. And the slide is still up on the screen. There's nothing on the slide about Catholicism, about mortal sins, about any of that. The witness was explaining his reasoning. I don't think it was intentional on part of the witness either. If we look at his interview of Ms. Clancy, one of the things that this witness has to do is determine whether the defendant knew the wrongfulness of her conduct. And that can be either that it was criminally wrong or morally wrong. And he explored that with her in the interview and asked her about whether she knew it was legally wrong. And she said she had no concept of legal consequences. And then he went on to ask her about moral wrongfulness and about her religion and whether she knew it was morally wrong. And she did say that she had knowledge that suicide was considered sinful. So I believe that's where the witness was going in trying to explain his reasoning. I don't think he was intentionally trying to inflame the jury or cause an issue in this case. I know I certainly wasn't, because I didn't ask a question about her religion or a question that would invoke that kind of response. I asked him to explain what was on the slides, and that's not on the slides. So there was no intentional conduct by the Commonwealth. That was not where I intended to go with this questioning, and I don't think that the witness intended to do any harm either. He was just explaining his rationale. So I would ask that the jury be instructed to disregard the answer, and I can speak to the witness and tell him not to talk about that reasoning for behind his thoughts, that he can testify about his conclusions, but to leave that portion of his reasoning out of his testimony.
Well, here's a concern I have, is what the witness did say in regards to go to God, baby, go to God. That was statements that had been made in evidence already. And then he indicated that was part of her expectation, that she and the children would be together in heaven with God. All right. Now we're getting a little closer to problematic area. Then he testified she was raised as a Catholic. And as I understand Catholic considerations, that's not necessarily what happens. How is any of that proper at this point? But it was not, well, I'm not going to declare a mistrial this time. What I am going to do is I'm going to bring the jury in. I'm going to tell them to disregard it. I'm going to tell them that's an inappropriate area of inquiry, and that this witness's understanding of Catholic dogma or Catholic teaching is irrelevant. There's no evidence of his background or training or having been to the seminary or any of that. And so I think, and that's where he injected that. And so I am giving that, but the Commonwealth, I'm going to strongly, and perhaps the strongest language, talk to him and let him know that he can't go into that. And then my thought is, we're going to bring the jury back in. I'm going to give them that instruction, and then I'm going to send them home. I don't want them leaving here today with the last thing they heard was a discussion about this witness's understanding of the Catholic teaching. That's not the last thing they're going to hear. And so my thought is that as best I can is to address that and minimize the damage or prejudice, because I do presume that this jury will be able to follow those instructions. And so that would be my thought. We'll come back. That will give the Commonwealth plenty of time to talk to this witness, to let him know the areas that he should and should not go into. And then we can come back tomorrow and we can resume his direct examination and cross-examination. All right, so that'll be my thought. We'll bring the jury in. I'll give them that instruction, and then we will recess until tomorrow. Okay?
Your Honor, and just for the record, could I note an objection?
Sure, absolutely. All right, so we ready for the jury? Yeah.
Jurors enter. This court's now in session. Please be seated.
Your Honor, for the purpose of the record, we return back to the trial of Commonwealth versus Lindsay Clancy. All parties are present, including the defendant and including the 18 jurors.
All right. Well, members of the jury, just before we broke, there was some testimony from that last witness. And I just want to give you some instructions in regards to that testimony. And I just wanted to let the religion that the defendant was raised with is absolutely an inappropriate area of testimony. It is to be stricken. It is not to be considered. I can't be any more clear of that. It cannot be considered. Secondly, the witness's understanding of Catholic teachings and considerations, again, is immaterial, it's irrelevant, it is to be disregarded based on that testimony. All right? And so, because we had a little bit of a delay due to this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to excuse you until tomorrow. All right? And so the thought is we'll come in, we'll finish up with this witness. I believe the Commonwealth has another witness at that point, and then we'll talk about where we go. I apologize for any kind of confusion or delay, but I just wanted to make sure you had those instructions with you when you left here today. All right? So, I'm sorry, so I'll see you tomorrow. Thank you.
Court, all right. Jurors, kindly close your notebooks. Place them on the chairs. This way, please.
Jurors have exited the courtroom. This court's in session. Please be seated.
All right. Counsel, one more time. Can I see it sidebar? All right. So we will be in recess until tomorrow. The anticipation is that the evidence will be done at some point tomorrow, with the thought that most likely we'll have a charge conference sometime probably tomorrow afternoon, and arguments in charge would be on Wednesday. All right. Subject to change, as they always are. So thank you, everybody, and we'll see you tomorrow morning.